4.1a Review, From the Seed to the Community in Transition. Throughout these pages, we have followed a journey that starts from the urgency of a new narrative and leads to the premise that all social and ecological transformation starts from cooperation, creativity, and inclusion. In the first stages, we faced the socio-environmental crises facing the world, and we saw how permaculture can offer answers based on the ethics of take care of the earth, take care of people, and share equitably. This perspective, anchored in the careful observation of nature and the efficient management of resources, is expanded when we understand that permacultural design does not stop at the agricultural or environmental, but also aspires to regenerate human relationships and social justice. In Chapter 2, it became clear that the adaptation of permaculture to diverse environments, whether urban or rural, becomes viable thanks to intergenerational collaboration, the shortening of supply chains, the strategy of community action plans, and the inclusion of groups with fewer opportunities. The common thread was understanding that each reality, cultural, economic, geographic, demands its own approach, but always supported by the same principles: deep observation, integration, and adaptation. Thus, each project has the capacity to become a hotbed of practical solutions and collective learning. Chapter 3 took us to the terrain of transition, understood as a process in which communities decide to consciously reconstruct their immediate environments, from the energy and cohesion generated by the transition movement, going through the power of ad hoc citizen groups, observatories, and cooperatives, to the need to keep the flame alive of indigenous wisdom. We saw multiple examples of action in which permacultural values converge. There, the idea is reinforced that environmental regeneration goes hand in hand with the direct participation of the inhabitants of each territory, and that support networks, listening, and cooperation are essential ingredients for long-term success. In this retrospective look, it is evident that permaculture transcends any purely technical approach. Techniques, such as composting, construction with natural materials, or participatory methodologies, are fundamental, but they remain empty if they are not inserted into an ethical and cultural framework that sustains them. The previous chapters made it clear that each initiative, from the transformation of an abandoned lot into a community garden to the launch of a cluster of farmers, contributes to weaving this new narrative based on reciprocity with the earth and mutual care. Together, they make up a practical vision of sustainability, capable of proposing a more resilient and hopeful future. As we enter this conclusion, we consider how to tell and embody this renewed story. So far, we've examined theory, shown tangible examples, and explored multiple methodologies, ranging from nature observation to conscious resource management. The moment of harvest, to which we will dedicate this final chapter, implies that each reader understands how they can contribute to this narrative, share it with their environment, and, above all, turn it into a daily exercise in life. It is the step that leads from individual reflection to collective action, and that at the same time closes and opens the cycle. The seed of permaculture, sown in each chapter, can flourish in communities that undertake the path of transition. YouTube video, Transitioning into Permaculture. 4.2 Telling the New Story, From Story to Action. Throughout the entire book, we have insisted on the need to build a story that goes beyond the accumulation of techniques or individual interest, and that calls communities to imagine, desire, and above all, co-create a different future. This task of telling the new story goes far beyond communication. It entails a cultural paradigm shift that transforms the way we interpret and inhabit the world. It is not just about explaining how permaculture works, but about showing why it is convenient for us, in the deepest sense, to build collaborative relationships with the earth and with those who inhabit it. The power of narrative in social transformation. Societies are built and reconfigured largely based on the stories they tell themselves. The history that predominates in the dominant culture has been that of the separation between humanity and nature, the overexploitation of resources, and unbridled competition. In contrast, permaculture invites us to recompose an interdependence narrative where the human and the natural dialogue take care of each other. By sharing stories of success and also of setbacks and learning, it is shown that there are alternative paths, ways of living that are not written in the logic of devastation. In this sense, concrete examples, community transitions, intergenerational gardens, local cooperatives, are not mere case studies, but narrative seeds that activate the collective imagination. Every time the experience of a family that has transformed its garden into a productive orchard, or of a group of neighbors who recovered a vacant lot to turn it into a meeting space is told, the ability to imagine different futures is enriched, and consequently take action to make them reality. From speech to participation. The great challenge is that the story does not remain discursive, but rather encourages stake and the co-creation of projects. Fleeting inspiration is of little use if it is not converted into concrete actions that take root in everyday life, composting organic remains, planting native plants, talking with the neighborhood to reorganize community spaces, or promoting local barter networks. Each of these gestures, no matter how small it may seem, reaffirms the new history in practice, making tangible an ideal that, otherwise, could be diluted in the inertia of what has already been established. The dimension experiential is, therefore, a fundamental bridge between discourse and praxis. When someone gets their hands dirty preparing beds, observes seed germination, or meets in a permaculture workshop to discuss and design solutions, they integrate that story within themselves, internalize it, and then transmit it with greater conviction. Thus, the story stops being a slogan and becomes a way of life that is shared and, at the same time, rewritten as more people participate. Obstacles and strategies to overcome them. Telling the new story can encounter various resistances, the inertia of current economic models, the skepticism of those who fear embarking on collective projects, the scarcity of resources or distrust towards any innovation that involves changing habits. However, we have also seen that permaculture offers multiple strategies to overcome those barriers. Narratives based on experience, presenting testimonies from neighbors, farmers, or groups that have already applied permaculture principles with tangible results, generates greater credibility than presenting abstract theories. Network construction. By connecting with other projects that share similar visions, you gain strength, share resources, and multiply the reach of your message. History stops being an isolated experiment and takes on the dimension of collective movement. Training and empowerment. Holding workshops, consultancies, or meetings open to the public reinforces the idea that the new history is not reserved for specialists, but that anyone can join the regeneration, learn, and contribute towards an inclusive narrative. Finally, it is essential to emphasize that the new history must involve all the voices. In previous chapters, we have insisted on the need to include adults with fewer opportunities, young people and older people in intergenerational cooperation, rural and indigenous communities, and those who live in urban environments. Profound change cannot be forged if the dynamics of exclusion are repeated or cultural diversity is minimized. On the contrary, enriching the story with the plurality of views, experiences, and knowledge is what makes it truly transformative and applicable in different contexts. Thus, telling the new story also implies an ethic of listening, recognize and respect the trajectories of each community, incorporate its historical memory and its particular relationship with the landscape. It is an act of humility that, paradoxically, strengthens the overall project, as it ensures that the solutions are relevant and not simple carbon copies of external models. Connect the story with the immediate future. In short, the permaculture narrative is not a distant or utopian project. It makes its way into daily actions, neighborhood collaboration, and sustainable production methods that are adopted on a small and large scale. With each shared experience, with each real story of regeneration, images of a desirable future are intertwined, collective, and committed to life. The key lies in not letting the story remain in words that blow away with the wind, but rather anchoring it in citizen participation and the will to test, learn, and improve constantly. In this way, the new story is built step by step and is nourished by practice. More than transmitting optimistic messages, it is about getting involved in the daily life of communities so that the regenerative discourse takes root and flourishes into concrete benefits for the planet and for people. In the next section, we will invite the reader to become even more involved in this narrative, offering a guide to take permaculture into action. YouTube video, Transitioning into Permaculture. 4.3 Invitation to Action. Build the future from today. At this point, we have covered the entire arc of permaculture, from its ethical foundations and design principles to its application in diverse contexts, and the creation of community projects that exemplify its transformative force. However, the key to this entire narrative lies not only in contemplating or studying it, but in living and sharing it actively. This last section seeks to provide a roadmap for those who wish to make the leap from reflection to practice, thus contributing to the construction of a more just and resilient future. Consolidate what has been learned, from the individual to the collective. The first step to putting permaculture into action is to integrate the principles in everyday life. Each person can start with simple gestures: compost organic waste, reduce the consumption of products with a high ecological impact, grow aromatic plants on the balcony or kitchen, or participate in a neighborhood garden. These actions are not mere symbols. They encourage a change in habits that, in turn, serves as a testimony and motivation for friends, family, and contact networks. However, the ecological and social challenges we face exceed the individual sphere. To generate a significant impact, it is essential to organize with other people and join efforts. From coordinating permaculture workshops in educational centers to forming cooperatives of producers and consumers, the possibilities are as varied as the needs of each community. The important thing is to remember that permaculture promotes resilient and collaborative systems to find complicity and forge alliances, which will strengthen the achievements. Network of resources and continuous training. On the path of permaculture, the training is a continuous process. Beyond specific workshops, there are exchange forums and specialized courses where permacultural design, regenerative agriculture, bioconstruction, or sociocracy are delved into. International networks, such as the Transition Network or global permaculture platforms, facilitate access to guides, virtual libraries, and reference projects that inspire and guide. Similarly, local permaculture groups, often driven by volunteers, organize regular get-togethers, seed exchanges, and visits to demonstration farms. For adults who already have very diverse life experiences and backgrounds, these collaborative learning spaces allow the exchange of knowledge and perspectives. For example, farmers with a long history can complement their practical knowledge with the soil regeneration techniques proposed by permaculture, or education professionals can bring participatory methodologies to their classrooms and social contexts. The result is a constant dialogue that enriches the movement and keeps it open to innovation. Multiply projects and spread hope. The transformative potential of permaculture increases as new projects get going, like the following ones: community reforestation initiatives, neighbors who organize to recover degraded forests and protect watersheds, supported by the analysis of areas and sectors, as well as the choice of native species that favor biodiversity. Example, the Greenbelt Movement, Kenya, greenbeltmovement.org. Collective composting programs, neighborhoods or municipalities that establish an organic waste collection point, encouraging neighborhood participation and returning nutrients to the local soil. Example, the Zero Waste Communities in Italy, zerowasteitaly.org. Agroecological cooperatives, producers and consumers partnering to promote short supply chains, direct sales and fair prices, ensuring food security and equitable distribution of benefits. Example, La Via Campesina, Global Movement, viacampesina.org/en. Knowledge exchange networks, workshops where different generations share farming techniques, traditional cuisine, crafts or natural construction, feeding the social fabric and giving value to cultural diversity. Example: Permaculture Action Network, USA, permacultureaction.org. These examples and many others show that permaculture is contagious when it becomes visible and accessible. In turn, each project that achieves a minimum of success activates the collective imagination, demonstrating that another way of producing, consuming, and living together is feasible. This is how this new history that we have been tracing is consolidated, not as an abstract ideal, but as a tangible practice that anyone can experience, weaving complicities, the strength of networks. It is essential to remember that permaculture does not aspire to individual self-sufficiency, but to conscious interdependence. Therefore, the final invitation not only calls for action, but also to create or strengthen networks that sustain that action in the long term. These networks can be transition movements, ad hoc citizen groups, producer unions, virtual communities, or even alliances with larger organizations. The greater the capacity for articulation, the more solid the collective action will be, and the less vulnerable it will be in the face of adversity, whether economic, political, or climatic crises. Furthermore, mutual support is the basis of resilience. When a project goes through a difficult period, lack of financing, resistance from the environment, internal problems, having the support of other groups is essential to rethink the strategy and stay on track. Likewise, the dissemination of successes stimulates new groups to begin their journey, generating a multiplier effect that expands the permacultural community. An open and renewable commitment. Building the future from today implies an open commitment, which is not exhausted after reading a book or completing a course. Permaculture is conceived as a lifelong learning process where each step involves evaluations and adjustments, while human relationships and ecological awareness are strengthened. It is a path in which, along with its fruits, people, their capacity for empathy and their creativity also grow. Ultimately, this chapter likes to invite each reader for action. The regeneration of the earth and social transformation go through the decisions we make daily and the way we decide to associate with others. If we have discovered something throughout these pages, it is that permaculture is not an unattainable utopia. It is a reality that is updated every time someone dares to observe, design, cultivate, share, and celebrate in community. This attitude, widespread and shared, is what can guide the future towards a horizon of greater respect, solidarity, and harmony with the environment. YouTube video, Permaculture in Action, the 12 Principles Demonstrated. Toolkit Proposal. Chapter 1. Introduction. Exploring Permacultural Ethics, reflection activity on the principles of caring for the earth, caring for people, and sharing equally. Living History of Permaculture, role play on the evolution of permaculture from Bill Mollison and David Holmgren to current movements. Active observation of the environment, practical exercise in exploring and recording natural patterns in different spaces. Chapter 2. Adapting Permaculture to Diverse Communities. Intergenerational connection, collaboration project between young people and adults to share knowledge about nature and resilience. Reconnecting with nature in the city, practical workshop on urban gardens and strategies to counteract environmental disconnection. Community resource mapping, participatory mapping of natural and social resources available in the community, creation of local regeneration plans, development of environmental restoration strategies based on community needs, short production and consumption chains, simulation on the impacts of supply chains on sustainability, fair market and solidarity economy networks, product and service exchange activity with permacultural principles. Permaculture and social justice, dynamics of raising awareness about the inclusion of groups with fewer opportunities in regenerative initiatives. Chapter 3. Transition to a Sustainable Future. Narratives of change, creation of stories about the transition towards a sustainable society from permaculture. Exploration of transition models, analysis of successful cases of communities in transition towards sustainability. Rescue of indigenous knowledge, research and presentation of ancestral knowledge in regenerative design, creation of ecological cooperatives, simulation game about the organization and management of cooperatives under permacultural principles. Chapter 4, Telling a New Story. From Speech to Action. Workshop on strategies to implement permaculture practices in everyday life. Planning for sustainable futures. Design of long-term projects with positive environmental and social impact. Invitation to action. Development of personal and collective commitments to apply permaculture in different contexts. Check the interactive book to see all the activities.